Mandela understood that there could be no democracy without peace, no liberation without reconciliation. In rugby, he saw an unlikely opportunity. The Springboks opening game represented a colossal challenge. As the hosts, they would be taking on the defending world champions, Australia. The official Springboks slogan, "One team, one country," brought home to the players that this World Cup was about a lot more than just sport.
Just imagine that I've just appeared on the stage now. I wasn't here before, but I'll continue from there. So just the partnership that we are going to be dealing with today achieved a number of things. The first thing is it's quite clearly they achieved the number one objective, which was to win the Rugby World Cup in 1995. So I have to say, if you were there, it was clearly against all the odds at the time. I think we were ranked about 4th or 5th in the world. But more importantly, they actually united the nation around the sport of rugby, or the game of rugby, which until then was actually quite divisive in our country following the eras of apartheid. But it then also became a physical symbol of how we could unite our nation, the Rainbow Nation, and start to heal the wounds after having averted a civil war just a few years before. And this is what became known as the game that made the nation. They also made a movie of this game, and I think some of you have probably seen that. But before I get there, I just wanted to give you a bit of background. So as most of you know, or some of you know, Mandela was a neighbor to our family and also got to know him quite well. And in preparing for this conference with our speaker, it was great to actually share a few stories of our experiences with Mandela. And the key learning that I got out of that is that even with all the best efforts of film producers, etc., they're not really capable of capturing the essence or the real story behind the story. So the man I'm going to introduce to you is going to share some of his personal insights to that story, but I think also around what Mandela meant to him, and having, I think, him as probably the greatest executive sponsor that you could actually wish for in anything that you wanted to achieve. But before he joins us, I just wanted to share a few things about his achievements. So as some of you know, he played flanker for the Springbok rugby team from 1993 until 1996. He won 29 international caps, and all of them as captain. Some of the prestigious awards that he achieved was 1993, he was the South African Rugby Player of the Year. 1994, he was the International Rugby Player of the Year. 95, the International Rugby Captain of the Year. And in 2005, he was inducted into the International Rugby Hall of Fame. He's now involved in numerous charities and was the founder of Make a Difference charitable organization, of which he is currently the chairman. He's also involved in a number of business ventures to develop and promote sport, notably in South Africa and also in England. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving François Pienaar a warm welcome. Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Dieter. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I must say it's all about timing. I left Prague at 20 minutes past 8 this morning. Just ran up the stairs with a fellow South African to join you here today. I think life is all about timing, and I've been very lucky in my life. I'm going to share some of my timings with you. Dieter, thank you for inviting me to share some of my experiences with the audience here this morning. I must say it's quite brave, but then SAB Miller is a brave company to invite a sports person to address such an illustrious audience. You know, as sports people, we are not the brightest species on planet Earth, and if you've played rugby, you are actually in the shallow end of the intellectual gene pool. So that's very brave. To compound matters and make my life more difficult is the fact that Dieter tells me that not a lot of people here would actually know a lot about rugby. Is that so? So can I ask those who know nothing about rugby just to give me a show of hands? And don't be embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed. Okay, fine. I think it's about 50-50. That's not too bad. So ladies especially, their hands went up. Let me give you the Rugby 101. It's played in 120 countries in the world. It's a fairly big sport. Actually in America now, it's the fastest growing sport in America, because in 2016 it's part of the Olympic Games. It's the shortened version of rugby that's part of the Olympic Games. The first Rugby World Cup was hosted in 1987 in New Zealand and won by New Zealand, and it's every 4 years. Next year we're going to London. It's hosted in England, and already there's a lot of anticipation about this tournament. New Zealand have won it twice, Australia has won it twice, South Africa has won it twice. But the footnote here is South Africa were not allowed to play because of apartheid in 1987 and 1991, but I'll come back to that a little bit later on. And England won it in Australia once, so in England they are the favourites to win next year. It's a fairly big business. Last World Cup, they made a net profit of about 140 million euros. If you think about it, it's actually quite small, so if real business people get their hands on it, it can be a massive business. They draw big crowds, for those that don't know rugby. The biggest crowd ever in rugby was drawn in Australia, New Zealand against Australia, over 100,000 people. And a couple of weeks ago I was at Twickenham for my club Saracens, and there were 70,000 people that watched the club match. So they get very big crowds, and the game is a grand game. But for those that don't know anything about rugby, the best way to describe it, it's a hooligans game played by gentlemen. It's a bunch of men that have got a lot of testosterone, and they try and maim each other legally to get their hands on this oblong-shaped rugby ball just to push it over a piece of whitewash. It's a fascinating game. So we carry the tag that we all brawn and no brain often. And we don't help ourselves either by some of the quotes, and I'm going to share one or two anecdotes with you. Tana Umaga, New Zealand captain, ferocious player, incredibly gifted, talented centre, captain New Zealand. And on his retirement, there was an interviewer that interviewed him as he finished his game, and he asked him about his career. And Tana said, "I owe a lot to my parents, especially my mother and my father." If you work that one out, it's one of the greatest players ever to have played for South Africa that you would not have seen, Frick du Preez. He spoke Afrikaans his whole life like me. I'm an Afrikaner. My English is a bit better now, but my English was just awful when I started playing. So when we were allowed back into the world of sport after the years of isolation, an English team came and toured South Africa, and they asked our player of the century. Now he's like, just to contextualize, he's like, in America, he's the Michael Jordan. In ice hockey, he's the Wayne Gretzky. I mean, he's an uber rugby player. And he mustered up his best English, and he said to the guys, in rugby, you must remember the 3 Ps. He says, first, you must push. He said, second, you must pressure. And thirdly, you must support. And if you get those 3 Ps right, then you know rugby. So Dita asked me to talk a bit about power of sport. I'll be very surprised, although you know nothing about rugby or very little about rugby, if sport has not fascinated you at some point in your life. If there was a sporting moment or an occasion or a team event that you didn't go, wow, how did that happen? I'm a sports nut. I'm crazy about sport. So given the audience age and demographics, I thought I'll pick out a couple of sporting events that I love. And maybe you would share those moments with me if you recognize them. On the 5th of June in 1954, a 25-year-old British medical student by the name of Roger Bannister becomes the first person in the history of the world to run the mile in under 4 minutes. In 1974, my hero, Muhammad Ali, stunned the world again by beating George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle in Kinshasa, Zaire. Hollywood made a movie about that. 24-year-old New Yorker Bob Beamon obliterated the world's long jump record in 1968 by a mind-bending 2 feet. Remember when Nadia Comaneci scored the first perfect 10 at the Olympic Games? And this 14-year-old Romanian, she did it an unfathomable 7 times. If you're a golf fan, let's say the untroubled Tiger Woods, when he burst onto the scene, was just incredible. He won the Masters in 18 under par, beating a rock star field by 12 shots. In Beijing, when Usain Bolt smashed the world record and he was actually slowing down in the 100 meters, it was just a phenomenal sight to see that, and the 200 meters, of course. And then he three-peated in the Olympics in Britain 4 years later. And now the conversation is, who's the best Olympian ever? Is it Bolt? Is it Michael Phelps that have won 22 medals, 18 gold? It would have been 19 if it wasn't for a young guy, Chad Leclos, South African, that beat him by a fingernail. And we're still celebrating that in South Africa. Or is it Sir Steve Redgrave? What he's done was just phenomenal. He won a gold medal in 5 consecutive Olympic Games over 20 years in one of the most grueling sports. I'm sure you watched the football final. I would be surprised if your heart didn't go out for Brazil, 7-1. Maybe only if you're German you would not have done that. I mean, I watched that World Cup with my boys and I went, oh my word. I knew the privilege of playing in a major event in your country. Will the Brazilians ever recover? And Germany, what a performance. They were dancing all over Germany and they still are. But I couldn't really imagine how Jesse Owens must have felt in 1936. A son from a sharecropper in Oakville, Alabama, when he marched into Adolf Hitler's great Berlin arena to face the Third Reich. And what did he do? He broke 3 world records and 1 Olympic record. You see, ladies and gentlemen, sport has this ability to transcend culture, creed, religion, race. Sometimes it's just a simple game, but often it's much, much more than just a simple game. It's full of life's lessons. It teaches you about failure, joy, disappointment, hard work, commitment, about values, maturity, teamwork. In my South African story, sport has taught me many things, but the greatest lessons that I learned is about healing and selflessness. Nelson �11𝗍𝗍 Mandela said, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. Sport can awaken hope where there was previously only despair. At this leadership conference, you'll have vigorous debates tonight, tomorrow, about where the world is going, where your business is going, what is needed to stay ahead of the competition and grow your market share. In the end, it's going to be courageous leadership that will set you apart. And I'll come back to that. Many people ask me, can you learn from sport? And are there lessons that you can apply in business? Now, this is an ongoing debate with a very good friend of mine. I think, Tony, you might know him, Mark Shaint, and we're having this long debate about leadership. And they've actually asked me if I want to put my thoughts down in a book, and I'm considering it. Mark makes a very strong point, and he was the marketing director of SAP Miller many years ago. He said, normally at a conference, they'll ask a former captain, i.e. me, to to come and share some of my stories and tell one or two anecdotes, or they get somebody that has trekked the North Pole with only an anorak and a husky as a partner, and they tell these stories. He says, but is it really relevant? What are the relevancies? Because those dare to do stuff that these people sometimes do, it makes shrinking margins and rising costs and inflation all almost meaningless. He said, he makes the point that you have to have done both in sport and in business to be able to share some of those views. I'm not going to harp on this because there are smart people here and you're working at it yourself. I just want to plant a couple of seeds with you, because he says, and I agree, business is quite different. It is dramatically different. But there's a couple of things that sport and business where the differences are vast. For instance, number one, a sporting team, for them it's personal. Imagine that German team when they put on their shirts before they ran out for the final. It is personal when you are representing your country. It is so focused, whereby in business it's sometimes not that personal. Can you imagine if the SAB Miller team, if it becomes so personal to them to grow the company beyond what analysts expect and what the leaders expect? Imagine how powerful that would be. So in sport, we have, it's very personal, and it's quite focused. Because number two is, sports teams, we train more than we play. Where in business, it's a journey. It's a journey of growth, of picking up experience, of leadership seminars and conferences, of getting better, pushing the boundaries. And in sport, it's quite ruthless. You see, our financial year end is every weekend, and everybody's a shareholder. Especially in a country like South Africa, everybody knows about rugby. Even the women next to the rugby field, you must hear with these ladies, their comments. And I turned to them and said, how many games have you played? None. See, in sport, if you play for your country, your financial year end is there for everyone to see. And on the weekend, they either buy or sell your shares. And in my local pub, if we've played well, the beers are free on a Saturday night. If we've lost, I think he charges me double, because he's just not happy with our performance. And I think the third thing that differentiates sport and business is, in sport there's a clear hierarchy. You get the coach, the captain, and the team. And if you don't do well, you get a DCM. Don't come Monday. You're fired. You're done. You're gone. Where it's not that easy in business. And you know that if you don't perform, that's it. There's somebody else that'll take your spot. And especially in the years I played as an amateur player, your drug is this adrenaline rush you get out by running out on a Saturday in front of 50, 60,000 people. But outperforming your competitors will be about leadership. And if you can get the SAB Miller tribe to become a little bit like a sports team for a focused period of time, I guess you'll see some incredible things. That's what Madiba did in 1994 when he became the first black president of South Africa. And I'm going to read to you what he said at his inauguration. The time for the healing of wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. The time to build is upon us. How often, ladies and gentlemen, do we hear amazing speeches by leaders, but seldom actually experience that leader delivering on his or her promise? Now, I had the incredible privilege to have tea with Madiba a couple of months after he made this promise. But to tell my story leading up to that tea, I have to rewind to the beginning. I grew up on the 2nd of January 1967. I was born into apartheid South Africa, where the basic human rights of ordinary South Africans were brutally violated. When I grew up in South Africa, it was an Afrikaans town where everybody is predominantly Christian, and your school, your home, and sport. In our days, sport was compulsory at school, so you had to do athletics in the beginning of the year. It doesn't matter how quick or slow you are or how far you can throw a javelin, you had to do athletics. It was compulsory. Then rugby. If you're a boy, you play rugby. And then cricket. So this is the world I grew up in. Invariably, We're an outdoor nation because of the fantastic weather we have in South Africa, and we love our barbecues, or braais, as we call them. So on a Saturday afternoon, you will see the parents congregating around a barbecue, and whilst the kids are playing in the garden. Sadly, how we grew up as children was seen and not heard. So we were excluded from the conversation. Couldn't participate in this conversation. People will talk about two things. I guess they do the same here, and they do it all over the world. Politics and sport. Now, if you're a fairly good sportsman, the first question would be, is he good enough? Do you think he's got what it takes? Do you think he can play for the Springboks? That's our national team. Do you think he can wear that jersey? And then the debate would be on their local teams and what's happening and who's going to beat each other on the weekend. And then it turned to politics. And when it turned to politics, the name Nelson Mandela came up regularly, followed by terrorist, bad man. If this man comes out of jail, we have got serious issues. God forbid he will be released from prison. Now that's the world I grew up as a junior, but sport was my escape. My parents didn't have money to send me to university, very expensive, and sport was my escape. I was fairly good at cricket and rugby, and I got a scholarship to go and read law, or study law at the University of Johannesburg, then the Rand Afrikaans University, and this is where I met people that spoke English properly for the first time, that could pronounce words, and people that have a different view in politics, people that have a different religion. You know, they were strong in their opinion, especially at university, and this was in the time of the big debate about the release of Mr. Nelson Mandela. My focus was again on playing my sport, getting my degrees, and moving on in my life. I wish I can stand here in front of you and say that I thought different. Of course I had thoughts, and of course I had these debates, but it wasn't as strong that it permeated through and became part of my everyday conversation. Fast forward, in 1991, Mr. Mandela was released, and Dieter, he stayed next to you guys for a while. You had that privilege to meet him. But white South Africans feared the worst. I mean, they were stacking up with bully beef and stuff because the world was going to come to an end. Civil war, we were on the brink of civil war. And, rightly so, we might have been on the brink of civil war. And there's a lot of stories that I have been privy to and readings on how close we were to civil war in South Africa. So in 1994, Mr. Mandela becomes the first ever black president. Only country in the history ever where we went to a democracy without bloodshed in the history of the world. And he made that beautiful promise and speech. So I had a call from his assistant, Mary, out of the blue. Phone rang. She says, "Hello, it's Mary. I'm Mr. Mandela's assistant." First of all, when she says, Mr. Mandela's assistant, and she says, "Mr. Mandela would really like to meet you." Fantastic, I said, and I said, "Let's firm up a time," and we did. We firmed up a time, and then I put the phone down, and my mind raced. Why? Why does he want to meet me? What will I say? And then I became a chick. What do I wear? Do I wear a suit? A tie? Can I ask for a little bit of water, if it's possible? Just a glass of water. So I did dress up in a tie and my best blazer. And I sat outside his office in Pretoria at the Union Building. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, if I tell you I was nervous, I was very nervous. I was so nervous that my palms were sweaty, and why does this man want to see me? What do I say? And then you hear his booming voice, and he's got this booming voice. François is here. And there's two things that struck me. The first thing is when he walked through his doors to come and meet me, I wasn't ushered in, he came outside to come and meet me, was the size of the man, how big he is. The television belies his size and stature. He was a sportsman, he was a boxer, and in the years of apartheid when the secret police was chasing him, he got up every morning at 5 o'clock and he would run on the same spot for 2 hours to stay fit. And he walked over to me and he took my hand and then he started speaking to me in Afrikaans. pure Afrikaans. I try to go to English, and Mr. Mandela, because I practiced a bit, got a couple of words in there. And he kept on taking me back to Afrikaans, and I went into his office, into his study, and for the next hour we had the most incredible conversations. I mean, I won't bore you with the topics we debated, but it was just the most incredible, genuine conversation. And I've been asked many times, so when you left that office, what did you think? I can't really remember most of my thoughts. I was taken by this man, but the one thing that stood out is I felt that I was obviously in the presence of a wise man, but I felt safe. I felt that I was in the presence of somebody that is genuine, that's honest. Now, move forward in my life in rugby. The 95 Rugby World Cup came to South Africa because of Mr. Mandela. We hosted the first ever major global event as a democracy. Now, yes, we were not given a hell of a big chance to win it. I won't go there, but our J curve was definitely J-ing. In business terms, we came out of isolation in 1992. I fortunately missed that first tour to the UK. We even lost to Scotland, man. I mean, how... But we soon... I kid you, we didn't. I'm joking. We realized very soon that because of apartheid, because of sanctions, we were left behind. South Africa, our test match arena was our provinces. And we were so passionate about our provinces. So on the international scale, we were way behind. We needed to understand each other, Afrikaners, English guys, and so we had to pick up a lot of experience, and we did. In 1993, I was fortunate enough to captain the first ever team to win the Super Tournament, Super 10 against Auckland. So I can bore you with how our trend was actually absolutely peaking at the right time, but in sport there are no guarantees. So we trained hard, but I'm not going to go into all of that. You get that about hard work, about obsession with detail, about all these things that one needs to do to win. We're playing Australia in the opening match, and Australia were the favourites. Legend now would try and tell that it was New Zealand, but it wasn't. Australia were undefeated in 12 months of rugby, test match rugby. They were the previous world champions, 1991, and they had a rock star team. If I go through their team, unbelievable. So we played them in the first match in Cape Town at Newlands Rugby Stadium. And we heard Mr. Mandela was coming to see us on the Thursday. Thursday is a captain's training. That's when I would take the team out and we look at strategy and what are we trying to do and the Australian weaknesses and ours and so forth. So it's my run. And while I was finishing our training run, these two helicopters flew in and landed, and I was there to go and say hi to Mr. Mandela and take him over to meet the team. Now, he's never met the team ever before, and they were all lining up, and I think it was 𝗣𝗿cie𝗠શકે𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗍, really big guy, that was first up. And as I walked towards the first guy, I said to Mr. Mandela, this is, and he said, 𝗣𝗿cie, how are you? Henny, how are you? Andre. He went through that team, ladies and gentlemen, and he knew the names of each and every one of those players without having had the opportunity to meet them beforehand. It was very important to him. And that cap he's got on there was a cap that my good friend Henny Leroux gave him that day, and he put the cap on immediately. Before we played France in the semi-final, Mr. Mandela was in the rally in KwaZulu-Natal, the heart of the Zulus, and he walked up to the podium, was doing a rally, and he had that cap. And when he lifted the cap, there were boos. And he said to him, these are our boys. So he took that cap and he wore it at the final. I mean, it was unfair to Australia. The next day, I mean, the guys were scraping the paint off the walls in the changing room. I mean, there was mist coming out of their ears. It was just one of the best games we've ever played. I realized, though, that the guys would be very tense, because when Madiba left that day, he didn't leave, if you know what I'm saying. When he said goodbye to us and the helicopters left, he didn't leave. There was this aura. So the next day was just the most incredible atmosphere in Cape Town. And I got the team to the ground very early, and I said to the boys, go outside, walk, go and shake the hands, sign autographs, be comfortable, become relaxed. And we had a fantastic game. The rest is for you to read or follow. We got to the final. And incredible. So just try and picture that now. You've worked your whole life to do the best ever deal, the biggest presentation, I mean, the biggest thing that's happened in your life, and multiplied by gazonks. This was what went through my mind before that final. This team, New Zealand, just played incredible rugby. There was a player, Jonathan Curran, that stole the show. 119 kilograms of rippling muscle, could run the 100 meters on grass in under 11 seconds in rugby shoes. He just destroyed teams that he played against, and he captured the imagination of the rugby world. I doubted if somebody would do something like that again in such a major tournament. So we were facing the All Blacks, our arch rivals. There was this incredible specimen that wasn't there in 94, 93 by the name of Jonathan Curran. So again, we go through game plan and tactics, and just two stories I want to share with you before I press on. Is the morning of the final, what we started doing is I got the guys down to the foyer early to go for a jog. Because what would happen invariably for me is I would be so tense the night before, I wouldn't sleep that well. You know, this is the biggest thing. So you're going, is that guy okay? You know, he didn't look so well at breakfast. Are we going to, you know, the right calls, situations, scenarios? And you would toss and turn, and then we'd get up in the morning and you would just watch the television without seeing anything, waiting for your opportunity to play. And normally the guys would be quite jovial. They'll come down and we'll run and they'll banter each other. We stayed at an hotel in Sandton, turned right and almost ran past SAB's offices there in Park Lane. So we were jogging and all the guys were just quiet. They didn't say a word. Tight-knit bunch like this. And all I could hear was the sound of the running shoes on the road. But then I heard voices, children's voices. So I looked over my shoulder and there were 4 little kids chasing after us, black kids. Kids that would never have known what the Springbok is or any of the players' names were chasing after us. They were selling newspapers on the street corner that morning, and one of the greatest pictures was on the front page. And they ran next to us and they were shouting the names of some of the players. And I kid you not, the hairs at the back of my neck stood up. Got back to the hotel and I packed my bag, and our manager, Morne du Plessis, phenomenally, just a phenomenal human being. On the Thursday night, I was in my room and I heard a ruffle under the door. So I went to the door and somebody stuck a piece of paper under my door, and I grabbed it, and it was Morne. And he went around the rooms and he shared with us a poem by Theodore Roosevelt, and I read it over and over and over again. It is not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or how the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and by sweat and by blood, who tries valiantly and errs again and again because there is no effort without error or shortcomings, and knows great devotion and spends himself at a worthy cause and knows the highs of ultimate achievement. But if he loses whilst daring greatly, knows that his place would not be with those cold nor timid souls that knew neither victory nor defeat. Beautiful. I read it over and over again. Many things happened. I don't have time for that. We got to the stadium, and we were in our changing room again, going through strategy, the guys trying to calm the guys down, very tense atmosphere. We heard a lot of things happening outside. Later on, we heard that a Boeing flew over the stadium, that Madiba walked out. We were oblivious to all of this because when you're playing sport, it's myopic. It's all about winning. That's what it's all about. That's how you measured. That's how my local guy at the pub, that's how he measures me. And there was a knock on the door. And the door opened, and I was just being strapped up, and I looked up, and in walked Mr. Mandela. Now, the black people in South Africa hated rugby. A lot of them did. He walked into our changing room wearing a Springbok jumper with a Springbok on his heart. Oof. That was powerful. And he just walked in and he just settled us. He said, "Thank you guys and good luck," or something to that. I can't even remember. I was just so emotional. And when he turned around, my number 6 was on his back. I mean, that is me. Now, we studied the anthem. Now, bearing in mind, my Afrikaans was okay, my English terrible, my Zulu, Xhosa, and Sotho is non-existent, and our anthem is 5 languages, because it was very important that I sing it properly and pronounce it properly. I couldn't sing. I stood there, and I bit my lip so hard, it might now sound melodramatic or over the top, that I didn't want to cry. You don't want to cry, this is a man's game, and it's a lot of people watching, it's not cool to cry. I couldn't sing. I was so proud, so immensely proud to be a South African and to play. And in the end, both teams were very close, and we could have won before full time, they could have. And then the final whistle blew, we were tied. One of the most amazing things happened then, we're going into extra time. Didn't plan for that. Footnote, plan for extra time. Didn't plan for that. Conversations, coaches coming on, and I was now thinking about, okay, well, how do we take the guys to the next level? And they were spent. The guys gave it their all. I looked over and I saw the other guys were also spent. Now it's going to be a war of attrition, and there is some brains in rugby too. But what we got was a gift. Now in that stadium was 67,000 people. 99% of the people there would be whites. A big chunk of that would be Afrikaners who love the game. It's our passion. Started singing 𝗍𝗍𝗁𝗍𝗍, which is an Ndebele tribe song, which is totally unusual. And that stadium just reverberated by the sounds of 𝗍𝗍𝗁𝗍𝗍. And I just said to the guys, play for your country today and you'll be okay. And in the end, we had a magnificent tournament by phenomenal rugby player Joel Stransky, who trained harder than most people during that World Cup. He got the opportunity and he took it, and when the final whistle blew, we became world champions. What just was incredible was what happened after that. When you're in sport, like I said, you're myopic. There's something happening on the side. There's importance. You realize, geez, this is big. It was just incredible what happened in South Africa when that final whistle blew. Ladies and gentlemen, we're all living a story that one day will be told by your spouse, your partner, a politician, and if you're really, really lucky, Hollywood will tell your story. So Hollywood tried to tell our story, and I saw no rushes or cuts of this movie, Invictus. I flew my family to LA for the red carpet. Some of my mates came from all over, and then you meet all these Hollywood Uber guys. They shake your hand, and I've become friends with them. There's 2 stories I'll tell you. So, Playing the Enemy is a book written by John Carlin, on which the movie is based, and it's a really good read. John interviewed me 4 times, and the first time he remembers when he interviewed me, he said to me, I said to him, John, what happened in South Africa was just incredible. I'm telling you, one day Hollywood is going to tell that story. We interacted and he phoned, he said, François, you won't believe it. They're going to do the movie. And I said to him, who's playing me? He said, Matt Damon. I said, absolutely fantastic. Yes, man, he's smart, he's good looking, and he's intelligent. So I had the privilege of meeting these Uber celebrities when they came to South Africa, but you don't talk to them, you've got to talk through the agents. And so the agent phones me, says, Mr. Damon wants to meet you. I said, fabulous. I said, I'll cook for him. He can come to my house. You could hear the other side was, okay, this is unusual. When I phoned my wife, she also thought it was unusual. I said, hang on a minute. Hey, this is what we do. So instead of taking him to a great restaurant and learn fancy words to try and impress him, I said, come to my house, I'll cook for you. On a weekend, you'll find me in the kitchen with dulcet tones and a glass of wine. I mean, I love it. And so I said, I'll cook. So then I had to write out a menu for my wife. And so he came, and Mr. Friegemann was already there, and I invited 2 of my friends. So I said to him, this is how we live, come and see, this is how we roll. And he just flew in from LA private, and there was a knock on the door, and I opened the door, and I kid you not, so I looked down, because he's fairly short. I looked down at him, and his first words to me, he looked up, he said, I'm much bigger on screen, man. And he jumped up and he hugged me, and I'm hugging him, and we hugged. I don't know you. Super, super nice guy, incredibly nice guy, just as a bloke. But I had no influence in the movie. I didn't see rushes. I just became friends with them. They obviously wanted to get my accent and so forth. And so now we're walking to see this movie. And all the Hollywood directors say to me, I really hope you like this movie. And I looked at my wife, I said, I really hope I like this movie. Sitting there with Jean and Stefan, dressed, and the movie started. And then the scene came on. The scene where I walk into Mr. Mandela's cell on Robben Island. This is 100% true. So after we beat Australia, the following day, we first of all celebrated that night. And we had a lot of your beverages that night. Because I said to the boys, go and celebrate. So the next day, with our wives and the girlfriends, we all went to, or partners, we all went to Robben Island, never been. And I was the last to walk into Mr. Mandela's cell. Everybody had a chance. And when I walked into his cell, I mean, I became incredibly emotional. Because I could stick out my hands and almost touch the walls. When I looked through the bars, I saw nothing, and I realized that this man was there for 17 years on Robben Island, and he came out with forgiveness in his heart. It's incredible. Then we walked into the mess hall. There were still prisoners on Robben Island, not political prisoners, petty thieves, predominantly coloureds, because in the Western Cape community, it's a very strong coloured community, and they hated the Springboks. Some of them still do. When a touring team comes and plays at Newland, they would support the opposition team because of apartheid. We walked into that hall, the roof almost came off. They cheered us like I've never felt. I never felt so proud. I mean, it was just an incredible moment. So when that scene broke, I started crying like you cannot believe in this, and I couldn't stop myself. And my mate, Bobby Tucker, who's also in touch with the film side, started crying too. And our wives are going, hey guys, pull yourself together. My boys are looking at me like this, you know, and I almost left the theater, which would have been a disaster. So I stuck it out, and many people have asked me my views on it. There's some stuff I really like in the movie, and there's some I really hate. What I really hate, and let's start by that, is I get a disproportionate amount of credit. Because the World Cup, there's nothing about our incredible coach, George Moyer Christie. There's nothing about our management team. And it was a team effort. You know, the team was just it was a team of rock stars. You know, we were not given a greatest chance to win it, but if you go and look at the facts, post also the Rugby World Cup, what happened to some of those players, they became the best in the world in their positions. So I didn't like that. I hated the rugby scenes. It is probably the worst rugby scenes ever. I mean, Mr. Eastwood stuffed up big time on the rugby scenes. The rugby scenes, a lot of grunting and groaning, and the game of rugby is gladiatorial. It's about passion, energy, and big hits. So I didn't like that. And after, the last thing I didn't like, after the movie, we were walking outside. And if Hollywood tells a story, of course it's true. Especially if you're children. You know, my son Jean, who's a keen rugby player, and Stefan, I saw Jean was absolutely puzzled. And we're walking out, and he looked up at me, he says, Dad, were you guys really that bad in 1995? You see, this movie makes us out to be horrific. I mean, we're so shocking, and now we go on and win. And I didn't like that. You know, if you're a competitor, I mean, those are the things you definitely don't like. What I loved about it is the notion and the fact that healing started in South Africa, that our country changed. Our bus couldn't leave the stadium. A famous politician, Dr. François Pienaar, he was a moderate politician, told me the story. He couldn't, his car, he gave up, and a taxi arrived on the way to Soweto, full of black people. Now in South Africa, there's always space in a taxi. It's never full. And they opened the door and they said to him, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Sandton. That's a posh suburb. They said, jump in, man. He told the story. They gave him a beer. They sang songs, dropped him off at his house in Sandton. And when he said, how much do I owe you? And they said, no, nobody is paying today. Incredible. I can tell you stories 20 years later of people when they see me and they regale their stories. So when the final whistle blew and we won, a reporter put a microphone into my face, and he said to me, François, tell us, how did it feel to win in front of 60 65,000 people. And I replied, it wasn't in front of 65,000 people. We won in front of 43 million people. Now, many times I've been asked, that's clever, eh? That's smart. How did you guys come up with that slogan? I said, well, I wish I was that smart, because I would be the Uber marketing guru if I was that clever. The reason why I said it wasn't 65,000 people, but 43 million people. When we arrived in Cape Town, before our first game against Australia, the lady that checked us in, black lady, would wear a Springbok. The gentleman that served me breakfast in the morning would say to me, have you had enough to eat? You must eat, you must be strong. You're playing the Wallabies tomorrow. And he would know. The lady that would make up our rooms would say, have you got enough pillows? Through 6 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, I saw how a country changed. I didn't realize it the day after the World Cup. I didn't realize it a week, even a year after the World Cup. I still battle to understand the profound impact that event had on our nation. There's a couple of things that I learned on that journey, and one is about forgiveness, the culture of forgiveness and selflessness, and embracing your enemy, which is what Mr. Mandela did. And if Isaac Newton has taught me anything, is to stand on the shoulder of giants, and I've been very fortunate enough to do that. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, the world is constantly in need of leadership, but here I'm not talking about ordinary or day-to-day leadership. I'm talking about courageous and selfless leadership. People who want to win against the odds. They love it. They train for it. They train very hard for it. And they work to achieve success. It's part of their DNA to transform their organizations and to keep pushing the boundaries. We could not have asked for a better example than Madiba, who embraced sport as a nation builder when his beloved ANC didn't agree with him. The time for the healing of wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. The time to build is upon us. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another and suffer the indignity of being the skunk of the world. Let freedom reign. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. God bless Africa. So if I can steal the last sentence of Madiba's inauguration, God bless the leadership of SAB Miller in this room, and may your next year be extraordinary. Thank you for listening to me, ladies and gentlemen.
Interesting one. So you've talked a lot about not being able to remember what's going through your mind, but the question is, what are you thinking when you're lining up against the All Blacks and they're doing their haka war dance?
I get so excited. Again, in 1994, when we toured New Zealand, we wanted to get into the psyche of the haka, so we invited Maori tribes to come and do the haka for us. I only then learned that there's more than one haka. We thought there was just one. So they came, the tribes came, and they explained the rationale behind the haka. And that's their tribes going into war. They would do their war dance, and the ultimate invitation to go into battle is to stick out their tongue in the end. You know, they got long tongues and they stick it out, and they're fearful. We then as a team discussed this, and we think it's magnificent. We thought, wow, you know, always envious on a tradition like that. So we discussed then what would we do. And if you look in the past, people have turned their back on the haka, other people have walked up to the haka and try to unsettle the New Zealanders. We said no, we will face them. And we will take energy from their invitation to go into battle. And it's magnificent. You know, if somebody stands in front of you and you know that he's inviting you to go into battle, either you love it or you don't. And we loved it, so we said we'll always respect it. And there's so much energy that I got. You would look at your opposition number, and that would be the focus. I wish we had something like that, because I think it's a magnificent tradition. But funny enough, if you go and look at the words of the haka, it's actually not that tough. It's about a little boy 𝗍𝗿 who's running away from a bunch of people that's chasing after him, and he hides behind a woman's skirt. And when they run away, he comes out and he sticks out his tongue. That's the words, quote unquote. Where the French national anthem is vicious. with the blood of our enemies, we will fertilize our soil. I mean, those guys are serious. They mean what they say. So, no, the haka for me is a magnificent tradition. It's something that should be embraced. And it's become more dramatic. You know, if you go and look at the hakas in the past, it wasn't that dramatic. Now with television and the theater and all these things, it's become boof. So I think it's more for people that are not in the sport, they are taken by it. And one or two players have always said, it's unfair advantage. I go, you know, then you shouldn't be in the game.
Great, thank you. Any more questions for François? Come on, you must be bursting with questions. I've got lots of questions. There's one over there.
I was thinking, you have the privilege of meeting Nelson Mandela and having the team and getting that inspiration directly. How did you convey that sense that you got from the rest of the team? They would have been in a very good position.
No, they weren't. You know, I guess the people have their own views, and our team, we didn't tolerate different views. You know, we didn't tolerate that. We had a black player in our side, Chester Williams, and we loved him to bits. Sadly, post his career, he wrote a book and he said he didn't feel that comfortable and the team might have not embraced him, which was rubbish. I was actually after the launch of his book, at a major gathering when he was in the audience, and I said, I need to pause here. I read what you said, and that's not true, man, because there was no skin color. So there was nothing that was enforced on the team. Leadership is, I guess, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and it's to do things that you want other people to do. You've got to go out and do it. In 1986, as a law student at the University of Johannesburg, I coached black kids in Soweto, Jabulani High School. We went into the townships. We did coaching clinics in the townships. Now, did everybody want to go there? Maybe not, you know, because I knew some of their folks would have had stronger views than my folks. But they were there, and when they were there, it's a life-changing opportunity. When you're there and you're coaching these kids and they've got these beautiful smiles and they don't want to let you go. They want to leave you. That leaves an indelible mark. So it wasn't, hey man, this is where we're going, and that you've got to be there and do it because you want to do it. And I guess that the rest will come. But in there needs to be a value system and certain rules that we wouldn't tolerate. And there were very strong rules in the team. And it permeated from our coach and our mentor and our manager.
The second thing, when you're some other coaches and you're trying to help them and share your learnings, what do you say to them? How do you say, when you're a coach, this responsibility you have?
Everybody's different. And there's no, I mean, if there was a perfect cocktail, take it, man, you'll be fine. You'll be a great leader. Everybody's different. In the team scenario too, everybody's different. Everybody's got hot and cold buttons, and I need to have a good understanding of that, because in an 80-minute game, when the final whistle goes, you're dead, you're done. If you haven't won, it's finished. And I'm getting a little bit irate now in South Africa. We are becoming a country of blaming the referee and not looking at, hey, what's happening with leadership. So coming back to leadership, everybody is different, but there's certain elements of it that are the same. And you know all of that, having a desire, setting goals, and making sure that you measure them and all those things. But to be true to yourself probably would be my answer, is that to be really true to yourself. And I've been very fortunate to have had great mentors. I come back to what Isaac Newton actually taught me, is to stand on the shoulders of giants because I see further. And I stood on the shoulders of incredible giants. Of course, Madiba stands out. But George Moekrisi, my coach and mentor, was just phenomenal. He had cancer for 18 years. In 1993, he was in intensive care. And we thought he was going to pass in 93. And he was there in 1995. And he shared, because he knew his finish line was around the corner, he shared stuff with me that was just had a profound impact on my life. So I had to readjust the whole time. And that's the one thing I still do. I readjust and have to measure and take the pulse and look in the mirror. You know, because that person in the morning, he knows you, man. He knows you better than anybody else. You can't lie to him or her. So those are the checks and balances. But leadership is unique. It's within a person, but there's obviously the books that you can read and so forth. The only thing that I say is to be true to yourself on this journey. And to be courageous is easier said than done.
I think there's a good correlation between what's coming out of the next World Cup and the situation, I suppose, in the room at the moment. we're in maybe thereabouts, we've been at the top, but maybe not at the top. There's a lot of speculation going on, will we win, will we not win? What would you be taking on the boys now leading up to next year that we can take part from today over next year?
So I've just lost 50% of the crowd, but the other 50, stick to that. And this is obviously not for consumption. I would hate this too. That's why you hear very little about me back home or so forth. I don't talk to the press on these things because you just make yourself look like a fool. The World Cup is a project. For me, it's a 4 or 5 months project. When a coach loses a rugby match, I'm planning for the next World Cup. There's no guarantee. So first of all, forget it. To get to the knockout stages is crucial, and then you've got to manage the variables the best you can. And one of the biggest variables is refereeing. And there's many things that I can share with you, but I'll hone in on that. And I'm going to take South Africa as an example. I'm taking the previous World Cup. So in the previous World Cup, 2011 in New Zealand, France should not have been in the final. They were the worst team ever. They lost 2 games in their pool stages, lost to Tonga. They were in the finals of the Rugby World Cup. They should have won the final. They were the better team on the final. Young referee, South African, first ever Rugby World Cup final. So nervous. There were 4 or 5 penalties that could have been given in that last 5 minutes. Those who watch rugby will agree with me. He didn't give any one of those penalties. Why? Number of reasons. Crucial reason for me is Richie McCaw, one of the greatest rugby players I've ever seen. The guy is phenomenal. Speaks English. He's got experience. 𝗍𝗿cie𝗠𝗁𝗍𝗏. Doesn't have a word of English, but high. Who's going to win that battle? Who's going to win that battle when it comes to crucial decisions? Fast forward, Craig Joubert, same referee, this year, in the Super 15 final. Richie McCaw, captain, no, he's not the captain of the Crusaders, but he's playing for the Crusaders against the Waratahs. Gave a penalty against McCaw. Wasn't a penalty. Waratahs kicked it, won the game. Margins. In sport, it's all about margins. Same referee, but the Wallabies, when it comes to closing games, probably the best in the world. Seriously smart, studying referees and so forth. So in the World Cup, again, in the knockout phases, it would be, have you studied the referees? Do you know what it takes to manage that scenario? And I'll move back. I studied the referees in '95. And I won't bore you with if he's a lawyer, I would speak to him in legal terms. Was that penalty 17A, sir? Are you sure it was 17A, not B? Just want to know. If he was a marketer, say, hey man, that was a tough call. Jeez, come on. You have to manage the referee. Ed Morrison was our referee in the final, an Englishman. I bet you nobody here knew that he had a glass eye. He had one eye. He's refereeing the World Cup final and he's got one eye. I didn't say to Mr. Morrison, if you can't see it, you can't call it. But I did say to Mr. Morrison, if you're not 100% sure, you cannot make a decision. You have to be 100% sure. We have to agree this before the game. We scored a try. One of my great friends who's passed away, Ruben Kruger, scored a try. Didn't give the try. Didn't see it. Fine with that. Because there's consistency and you can manage that scenario. And I can show you where 𝗍𝗿cie, my counterpart, one of the greatest managers of referees ever, he should be actually standing here and talking, not me. But I learned a lot from that. How do we manage that? How are they trying to buy 1 or 2 penalties? Because in the World Cup next year, I mean, it'll be a spectacle. But come the knockout stages, it's 80 minutes. And you've got to perform within that 80 minutes. You've got to think under pressure, and you've got to make decisions under pressure. And because of the laws of the game, it's so intense that if you haven't studied and worked on that, you will be heartfelt done by. 2011 Rugby World Cup, we lose to Australia. Terrible refereeing, yes? Terrible. The guy was kicked off the panel afterwards. But how did we lose the game? One of our most experienced guys, they had a benign line out in our half. He pulled the guy in the air. That's how we lost. He shouldn't have pulled the guy. Go and look at the facts. One of the most experienced guys knows. He goes and pulls the guy in the air. We give the penalty. They kick it. We lose. Once that is done, you're dead. You know, to complain in the press and so forth. They're going to go, sorry man, we're just going to review that and give you back the cup. It doesn't work like that. So we have a good squad. So does, I mean, the All Blacks will always be there. They perform. Thank goodness the World Cup is not a longer tournament and there's knockout stages, because if it's on a point system, I think they'll win it every time. But because of the knockout nature of the competition, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where people freeze. That's where decisions are made and guys take the opportunity, and you'll see the brilliance of athletes come out and step to the fore. That's why it's such a wonderful thing. So the variables are something that we need to pay attention to. And I mean, I can gush on and on and on, but I'll stop with that, because the other 50% has just gone to sleep. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.